Good morning. This is Karen with Karen's Cards and More, and today we're going to work on this Highland Heather oval flap card. The sentiment is in this oval hinged flap, and I used two different types of embossing techniques on this that I want to show you today. And so this is what we're going to make. Let me show you the inside. Very simple on the inside, just a couple of stamped images that I colored. I left the rest blank to write a personal message because I'm using this as a sympathy card. So that's the card that we're going to make today. So let me show you what you need. The die set that I used the stitch shapes, and we're going to use the two largest rectangles. I'm going to go ahead and take the second largest out because I'm going to need that. But you'll also need this one as well. So you'll need the two largest. Then you'll also need the Ornate Floral 3D embossing folder, because we're going to need that. And then for stamp sets, I used two different stamp sets. For the images, I chose this and this out of the Ornate Style. And then I used the Peaceful Moments because I love this with Deepest Sympathy. I think that's really pretty the way they've combined the script with the printing. I just think it looks really nice. So that was the sentiment I chose for this card. Let's talk about the cardstock. I didn't use any designer series paper in this one. The cardstock is the Highland Heather, and I used 5.5 by 8.5, and I scored it at 4 1/4. I used two Whisper White pieces that are 5 1/4 by 4. Then you'll need a scrap of the Highland Heather, and this is where you're going to die cut that largest stitched oval. And then you'll need a scrap of Whisper White. It needs to be at least 5 inches that you can fold in half, and you want to get this fold really good. And you can place this second largest oval, stitched oval die on it just to make sure you've got enough coverage, because you're going to be die cutting this at the edge. So it has to be double enough to make your flap, your hinged flap for your sentiment. You need it at least 5 inches so that you can score it 2 1/2, and at least tall enough to fit the oval. Okay? So let's get started with our card. The first thing we're going to do in this card, I used 3 of the gemstones, but I wanted them to be the Highland Heather. So we're going to go ahead and color those now so that they can be dry by the time that we're going to use them. I used this second largest one, and I just took my darkest of the two Highland Heather Stampin' Blends, and I just colored it. And I did 3 of them. So I'm just going to give them good coverage. And then we're just going to let that set because we're going to need that later on, and that way when we handle them, the ink will be completely dry. The next thing that we're going to do, I had some of this petal pink metallic edge ribbon that I wanted to use up, and that's the ribbon that I used, believe it or not, it is the ribbon that I used on the bow. Let me show you what I did. And I'm just going to cut a small piece, but you'll need a piece big enough that you can make your bow with. So I started by using the Stampin' Blends, and let me show you that. When you put the Stampin' Blends, I knew you could color the white ribbon, but I didn't know about this pink, how it would turn out. So I started with the Stampin' Blend, and I didn't like the color of purple. So I thought, well, let me try the lighter one. So then I'm going to use the brush tip. And so then I tried the brighter one. or the lighter one. And I still didn't like the shade of purple. If you like those shades, then that's great. You can use that. But I didn't like it, so I wanted to do something different. So what I did is I used my Highland Heather ink pad. And I just used a sponge dauber. And I just did this. And you can go as dark or as light as you want to go. You can go darker in some areas and lighter in others and give it a variegated look. Whatever, you know, whatever look you want to go for. And I just kept doing this until I got it a color that I really liked. Now I'm going to hold this up. Let me get my ink pad closed and out of the way so we don't have any problems with that. So you can see the difference in the shades. And I like this paler. I like the more lilac look. So that's what I did with the ink to get that look, because I didn't really like the ones with the Stampin' Blend. So that's how I did the ribbon. And so you do that and make your bow and you're good to go on that. Let's talk about what I did with the stamping. First, let's make the embossed image layer. Now you can see that I used Whisper White. You could use the Highland Heather, and I'm going to show you one. I did one before doing the video with the Highland Heather so you could see the difference. Just depending on what look you wanted. I wanted the white because I was going to use the Highland Heather oval. But there's what it would look like if you started with the Highland Heather. I chose to start with the piece of white. So here's what you're going to do for this. You're going to take, this is the first embossing technique I'm going to show you. On your embossing folder, there's two, if you open it up, there's two sides. There's the side that has the Stampin' Up emblem, and then there's the other side. We are going to use the one with the Stampin' Up. And we're going to use our Highland Heather ink again. And this is where it might get a little messy. So what you want to do, I used a brayer, and what you want to do when you're using the brayer, don't rub like this, because then you're only getting ink in just one little area of the brayer. So what you want to do is you want to roll your brayer across the ink pad so that you get good coverage. And then you're just going to roll this on this folder. And you can go as much ink or as little ink depending on the look you want. And you're just going to put this on here. Now you can clean this. What I usually do is right when I'm done doing this, I'll use a baby wipe to clean it. But then you can just run it under soapy water and clean that ink right off, and it won't be a problem. So I'm going to set that ink pad aside. And then you just want to put your piece of Whisper White in there and close this, and I'm going to run it through my embossing machine. Let's get this done. I know this is off camera, but I'm trying to have enough space to work with everything, so let me run this through. And there's what you come up with. Now, on this particular one, I don't like it. I don't think I got enough coverage. I want more. So, I'm just going to bring the ink pad and the brayer. And you want to still do it on this same side. And I'm going to concentrate, and you can go either way. I'm going to concentrate on the areas that I don't think had enough ink. And I'm just going to make sure I get some really good coverage. Okay. Now let's see what this does. And notice I didn't pull that off and move it. I just want it to hit the exact same spots. Okay? So I'm going to run this through again. And it could be because you have to play with your sandwich that you're making, your normal sandwich that you run through your die cut machine won't work with these 3D folders and you have to play with it. It could be that you didn't have enough pressure and you just needed to add a little more. So definitely consider that. And I'm just going to run this through a couple times. I know I'm off camera and you're probably sitting there just whistling a tune waiting on me to get done. Okay. Let's see how this one turned out. And I like that much better. And I'm okay with the fact that it's darker in some areas and lighter. I'm perfectly okay with that. I like that. Same thing with this as with the brayer. Some soapy water and it's all cleaned up. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside. We're going to need that in a few minutes. And we're going to go ahead with our other stamping. Our other piece of the 5 1/4 by 4 is going to be for the inside. And so we're going to use this little flower stamp that I showed you from the Ornate set. And we're going to use the Meadow ink. And I just want to put these down in the corner and then we're going to color them. And if you've watched my videos, a tip I like to give for people who are new to stamping, stamp off on the paper first. Get your confidence. Know that, hey, I can do that. And you can turn these flowers however you want them. Doesn't really matter. It's just your preference. So there's one. And I want to put one in this corner. There's the other one. So we're done with that. And then I just colored these in. What I used was the Stampin' Blends. I used the Mossy Meadow for the leaves, and I used the Highland Heather for the flowers. So let's start with the Mossy Meadow. I always like to start with my dark values first. And on this one I don't want to use the brush tip, I want to use the other one. And I just went down the middle. I am not an artist, so the Stampin' Blends make this pretty easy, and that's a good thing because I'm just not an artist. Now, the light color, I used the brush end. And play with these. You'll get to know what you really like and what you don't. The only thing with the brush end is it's going to bleed a little, so you don't want to go right to the edge. And as you go over that dark spot, it's just going to blend it with the light. So you don't really have to be an artist, and that's a good thing because I am definitely not. And it will look different as it dries than it does when you first do it, so keep that in mind too. Okay, and that's all I did for the leaves. Now for the flowers, I took the darker value for the Highland Heather and I did the middle. And then I did these lines, these accent lines, just to give it some dark. And I'm not being real careful. I'm just going over them a little bit just to give some additional dark in other areas. Just like that. Then I came back with my lighter and I just went over it. Just like that. And you could go back with the dark if you wanted more definition from the dark, and you can just play with it until you get the look that you're wanting. You could go leave some white on the ends if you wanted a white, some white like that. you could definitely do that. Just play with it and see what looks good to you. But the Stampin' Blends do a lot of the work, so you don't have to worry about, well, I don't know what I'm doing with shading. Well, it'll do a lot of that for you. So that's all I did for the inside of the card. Okay, now let's talk about the oval, because that's going to be our next step. First, we got to die cut it, and we got to get that hinged effect. What I did was I took the piece of white that I told you about, and that was folded, and I made sure I went over that with my bone folder, front, back. I wanted a really good crease on there. Then I took this, if you see this raised up edge around, that's the part that cuts. The other part is the stitched, but the one that's going to cut through is that raised up edge. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to put this die cut, this die, so it's just, and I went to the end, so, you know, closer to this end, so I wasn't wasting a lot of it. But you want to set it, and you can kind of use your finger and feel, make sure it's off the paper, because if it's off the paper, it's not going to cut through, and that's what we want, because we want that fold there at the top. And so I just tried to center it, because, you know, you don't want your fold like that, right? So I just kind of centered it where I wanted it, and made sure that that top edge was not on my paper. And that's where a magnetic plate will come in handy, because it'll hold it while you're putting it through the die cut machine. And I'm gonna again be off screen to put it through the die cut machine. And every one of these I've done has come out different depending on where I place the oval. Some of it, you know, you have a deeper fold, some of it you have less of a fold. And I run it through twice, just because I'm cutting through 2 layers of, you know, the doubled over cardstock. Okay, so let's take a look. So then it looks like that. And you can see there's part that doesn't have the stitching. That's okay, because we're going to cover that with our bow, right? Okay, so when you go to peel this apart, just kind of flex it a little, because at first it's going to be stuck together because of that stitched edge. So just kind of bend it a little and it'll pop right open for you. Now here comes the second embossing technique. Now you kind of have to be fast with this one. And this will work for any color ink pad that you want to use. Whatever color you want. If you don't want to emboss with the white, the gold, the silver, the copper, the black, you can emboss any color ink pad that we have. You just have to do it quickly, and let me show you what I'm talking about. So we're going to need our Versamark. We're going to need our, no, we're not going to need Versamark. We're just going to need our Highland Heather. We're going to need our Stampin' Buddy. And we're going to be doing this image here, this flower image from the Ornate set. And I'm going to start by using my anti-static, my embossing buddy. What this does is keep the embossing powder from sticking where you don't want it to stick. It's going to stick only where there's ink. And you're going to need clear embossing powder. And I'm just going to use a piece of scrap because I want to be able to contain my extra, right? Okay, now here's where you got to be fast. So these inks are going to dry much faster than your Versamark. With Versamark, you can stamp it. You got a little bit of time to get the powder put on there, and you don't have to like really rush to do it. You can't leave it set a real long time, but you don't have to be really rushed. With this, you've got to get it on there right now because this is going to dry pretty quickly. So what you want to do before you stamp is you want to kind of figure out how you want your flower to look, because it's going to look different if you put it this way or if you put it this way, or if you want it, you know, so you want to figure out, okay, how do I want my flower to look? Where do I want, and I want it like this, okay? And if, you know, if you're not sure, then just stamp it to the side and see if you like it, okay? See the way the flower looks. Okay, so you're gonna stamp up your ink, your pad, your ink, your stamp, right? Okay, now, and this is where it's kind of hard because this is folded, and I'm gonna give this an extra fold. I'm gonna get my bone folder because I want this to stay down. I want it to stay closed when I'm trying to stamp. So I'm gonna put a little more ink on here. Okay, now I'm going to stamp this. Now here's where it's gotta go fast, and I hope my head's not in the camera. Okay, now here's where you gotta be fast about getting this on here. You don't wanna leave it set, because if you leave it set, it's not gonna emboss. Okay, now I'm just gonna put another, I'm gonna do it twice just to make sure I've got good coverage. Because this is clear, you can't really see it. Now, if you notice, our image looks really dull. Well, wait just a minute, we're gonna fix that. So I'm just gonna pour that back in there and move it out of the way. And I'm gonna get our ink pad out of the way. Once the embossing powder's on there, it's not as much of a rush. Until you get that on there, it's a rush, okay? So, I'm gonna use my heat gun, and I know this is going to create some noise, but I want you to be able to see this. But another thing to think about, I have an older heat gun that I had a long time ago. Stampin' Up does sell a heat gun that has, mine just has one, it's either on or off. The Stampin' Up heat gun has high and low. So if you don't have a heat gun, definitely check out the one that Stampin' Up has. Okay, so I'm gonna try to make sure you can see this. As it heats up, I hope you can see it starting to darken. I don't know if the camera is showing it as much as I can see it here in the studio, but as you put the heat to it, it darkens. And then, I'm just going to go over it. It's harder to see than some of the other kind powders, you know, that you use. So, and I don't know if you can see it, but it gives it a shiny, it gives the ink that shiny look, okay? And it's embossed. That was your second embossing technique that we used today. So if you've done this, you've already learned, right? Okay, then the next thing we need to do is to get our sentiment in there. And so for this, we're going to go back to the Meadow ink. And this is our With Deepest Sympathy. And again, if you're new to stamping and you're nervous about getting things straight and all that, just stamp on your scratch paper and see if you like it. Well, maybe you don't like how much ink, or maybe you don't like the amount of pressure. You can always do it here. Sometimes if you don't get your stickers on your stamp, you have to pay attention to the actual stamp instead of looking at the sticker, okay? So I'm going to figure out where I want it. And I always just hold it for a few seconds. There we go. Done. Okay, I'm going to set that out of the way. Set our stamp pad out of the way. Okay, now we're ready to start assembling our card. So we're going to take our Highland Heather, and the first thing I'm going to do is put the inside panel. Now you'll notice that it bleeds through when you color with the Stampin' Blends. That's okay. You're never going to see it because it's going to be up against the cardstock. So don't worry about that at all. So I'm just going to put some snail adhesive on here. Okay. All right. And you're just going to kind of eye it at the top, make sure you got it straight. All right, now if you just flip like this, you're going to be working on this. When you turn it over, if you flip like this and you go putting the next part on here, it's going to be on the wrong side. So if you put the inside on first, just flip like this, because when this is folded, this is going to be your front. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our embossed layer and we're going to put some snail on this. And you could use, because you've got these little embossed parts where they're, you know, indents, you could use liquid glue. A lot of times that's what I do when I'm working with embossed pieces. And you might want to think about, you know, if you've got it so that there's more color in different areas, you know, take a look at it. This one really doesn't have a top and bottom, so you can just figure out where you want it. And just kind of eyeball it and put that down. Okay, now the next thing that you want to do is you want to put on your purple mat. And what I did is I wanted this to have a little dimension, so I took my dimensionals and we're just going to put a couple of those on the back side. And I want to show you this before I go on. Let me get these pieces off of here. Just a little side note, just a little tip. I just used the last two dimensionals on this sheet. Don't throw this away. Keep this. If you're new to crafting, you might think, well, there's no more dimensionals. Save this, because you can cut these. This is the same material. It has the same vinyl backing, and the underneath is still sticky, so you can cut these and use them. It won't hurt a thing, so definitely don't just throw that away. Okay, so then you're going to take this and you're going to center it. Now, I think what I'm going to do, I should have done before I took my paper backing off, maybe even before I put my dimensionals on. There's always an oops, isn't there? I mean, if you ever make a video, there's always an oops. So I'm just going to put those, well, that's not going to work. Maybe it'll work. We'll try. Because it would be best to put our white oval on this before we put the dimensional on there. And so I should have done that. If you're doing this at home, put your white piece on before you put your dimensionals on. Okay. So on the back of the hinged oval, we just want to put some snail. And when I put this on, I just closed it. That way I could try to center it, because I wanted to center my oval the best I could. Okay. Now I'm going to pull these off. They should come off pretty easy since they were off once already. Okay. And we're going to bring the card back in. And we're just going to place this in the middle. Like that. Okay. Now, I'm just going to fold this. And you could, you know, you could have folded it before you start decorating the front. Whatever works for you. The point is you're going to get them all, you know, you're going to get all parts of the project done. And I'm going to go back across the front and just really give it a good, I want the fold to be really good. Okay, so we're just about done. We talked about how to do the bow at the beginning. So I already have my bow made. And what I did is I used mini glue dots. Sometimes it's hard to figure out where they're starting. Okay, looks like here. So I'm just going to take a mini glue dot off of there and put it on the back of my bow, like that. I didn't realize my nails matched the color I chose for this card. That was purely accidental. Okay, So I'm just going to put that, you know, wherever you want it to look good, wherever you think it would look the best, because it helps cover the part of the oval at the top that doesn't have the stitching, okay? And then we're going back to our dimensionals that we colored. Remember at the beginning we colored our gems that we colored at the beginning. We're just going to go back and we're going to take those and we're going to put those on. Oh, a runaway gem. And I just used 3. You can do, you know, you can do it however you want, put them wherever you want. And we have the card done. There's your flap. And there's your inside. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed the embossing techniques that I showed today. Please, if you've never subscribed to my channel, subscribe below and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. You'll also see links to my Facebook group, my Facebook page, Pinterest. And if you want to order any of the products that you've seen here today or any other Stampin' Up! Products, I'd be glad to assist you with that. You can check out my website at karensmith.stampinup.net. Let's craft again soon.